Joining me now with more insight on the latest developments in Syria is foreign policy analyst and journalist Robin Wright. She is currently the United States Institute of Peace Wilson Center Distinguished Scholar, and her latest book is The Islamists Are Coming, Who They Really Are. Robin Wright, welcome to the show.
Nice to be with you.
What is your assessment of where the Syrian civil war is right now? Is it going to be a fight to the finish with only one guy standing, a country destroyed, a society demolished, the place literally in a heap of rubble?
Well, the momentum that the rebels had for more than a year certainly has been reversed in recent weeks, with the regime pushing back with the help of particularly Hezbollah troops from neighboring Lebanon to take over Qusair and to push toward what could be a decisive battle in Aleppo, which is the New York of Syria.
So where does it stand right now? I mean, is Bashar al-Assad and his forces, are they in the ascendancy right now? They hold more ground?
Clearly the momentum is on the side of the Syrian regime. I think the problem is that neither side can win this decisively. The Syrian government has been able to hold more territory, particularly during the day, but the rebels can push back at night. And, you know, this is a kind of insurgency. This is not a traditional civil war. And the rebels hold some significant territory in the north, a little bit in the south. The largest chunk is probably of the inhabited territory is probably held by the regime. But this is not something that is going to end anytime soon. Neither side has enough yet to defeat the other.
Right, and when we talk about the rebel opposition, this is not one group of rebels that are fighting the government there. It's disparate groups, some of them with allegiance to different parties in the Middle East, and some hostile to the United States, some friendly to the United States. Who are the main factions?
Well, there are so many factions. They're estimated to be somewhere between 200 and 2,000 different types of militias. Many of them fall under the rubric of the Syrian Military Council, or the Free Syrian Army. And those are the groups that have been particularly helped by the West and the Gulf governments in terms of arms and communication equipment. Then you have groups like the al-Nusra Front, which is aligned with al-Qaeda and which has an extremist or Islamist ideology, wants to see Islamist law imposed in a strict Islamic state. They have not only different parts of the country, they have different ideas about what they want Syria to look like down the road without President Assad in power.
Yeah, and right now we are seeing this conflict being portrayed at so many different levels. I mean, on the one hand, it's being portrayed as the battle between the United States and its allies on the one side against Syria and its allies on the other side. On another level, it is seen as a battle of Sunnis against Shiites. And yet, on another level, which you wrote about in Time magazine just a short while ago, it's seen as a battle between al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. And looking at the last distinction that you made there between al-Qaeda and Hezbollah, just define that for us. Who are they?
Well, Hezbollah obviously are the militia, the very powerful militia out of Lebanon. Al-Qaeda through al-Nusra Front has been active in helping the Sunnis, and this is how the sectarian element has really played out on the ground. The problem, as you rightly point out, is that Syria is no longer just about Syria. This is the strategic center of the Middle East, and it has become a war that plays out for the future of the Middle East, for the future of the relations between Sunni and Shiite, the relations between the kind of axis of Russia and China and Iran on one side, and the United States, its European allies, and some of the conservative Gulf sheikdoms on the other. So that this war, everyone now has a stake in it. It has a global impact, a regional impact, a local impact, a religious element, and that's what is so frightening about this war, that it seems to disintegrate even further every week with some new dimension to it that complicates the potential for a peaceful resolution.
You know, just a few weeks ago, or at least 2 weeks ago, there was the G8 meeting in Northern Ireland, and Syria featured very strongly at that meeting. In their final statement, the leaders said that one of the things that has to happen in Syria is that these disparate rebel groups have to unify under a single leadership. Isn't that a bit of a pipe dream?
Well, I think so, and that's one of the great problems. The Syrian National Coalition has been unable, because of ego, because of ineptitude, because of political rivalries, to come together to form either a shadow government as an alternative, as we saw in Libya, where you had a group that formed a shadow government, an alternative inside Libya. That hasn't happened in Syria. And they're divided in terms of what their goals are, in terms of what their political allegiances are, and they haven't even been able to come up with a group that would be an interlocutor in peace talks. And ultimately, I think everyone believes that this is not a conflict that's going to have a military outcome, at least one that is completely decisive, that it will take some kind of peace talk, some kind of negotiation, some turning point to actually end what is, horrifying now, costing over 100,000 lives.
So what are the options for countries like the United States? President Obama took a decision to supply small arms and ammunition. It seemed more like a token gesture rather than some kind of move to tip the balance in favor of the rebels. There seems to be a lot of domestic opposition to the United States getting involved. There's been talk of a no-fly zone. What are the options?
Well, President Obama, first of all, has spent his first term trying to get the United States out of two wars in the Islamic world, in Iraq and Afghanistan, and has very little appetite to get into a war in Syria, particularly because there's also the issue of Iran looming down the road. What happens if there isn't some kind of deal brokered on Iran's controversial nuclear program? And so you have both countries out there as potential areas of some kind of military intervention. And I think the president actually is trying to avoid both. What is going into the calculations in the White House is not just, what if we get involved now, but what happens if we are seen to own whatever happens after Assad is out of power? And does the United States then inherit, de facto, the future recreating Syria? And between the destruction and the divisive elements inside the country, this is the most divided country in of the 22 Arab countries. And recreating an artificially created country, created by the British and the French a century ago, is going to be a really hard challenge. And I think there are a lot of questions today about whether you can actually hold Syria together, given the fact not just Sunni Shiite, but you have Druze and Christians, and you have ethnic elements, Kurds. Can you hold it together at all?
Would it be, can we say with quite a fair degree of confidence that there will be no U.S. military involvement on the ground, so-called boots on the ground in Syria?
I don't think there is likely to be any scenario soon that would lead to American infantry on the ground. Special forces is a different question. The United States military strategy worldwide has shifted increasingly to the use of special forces and special operations, as well as the use of drones. So there are very different kind of direct involvement scenarios that wouldn't necessarily mean an invasion like in Iraq, or might look a little bit more like Afghanistan in terms of working with local allies, but I still don't see that anytime soon.
Robin Wright, thank you very much for joining us.